In this video, we'll show you the teardown and reassembly of a ram front axle that covers 03 to 13. We've got our axle on a stand for easier viewing. We've got our tools on a cart all ready to go. And we've got our shop dog. She's ready, so let's get started. A part and tool list is included at the end of this video. Disconnect your ABS cable. Remove the brake calipers and hang them out of the way. Remove the brake rotors using a soft hammer. Make sure you put a wheel nut back on so the rotor does not fall off. For 2009 and newer trucks, use a 10mm socket to remove the brake shield. Remove the dual rear wheel adapter from the wheel hub using a soft hammer. A 21mm and 10mm wrench can be used to remove the tie rod nut. With QU95054 tie wire installed to catch the tie rod, use QT1200 tie rod separator. Don't forget to lubricate the threads on the tie rod separator. Use a 15mm socket and 18mm wrench to remove the steering dampener. Unhook the wire and remove the tie rod assembly from the vehicle. Unbolt the track bar with a 21mm socket. Use a 13mm socket to remove the differential cover pan bolts. Remove the cotter key from the outer axle shafts. Use a 1 11/16 socket to remove the axle shaft nut. Use an 18mm socket to remove the hub bolts. Install a suitable hub pulling tool onto the wheel hub assembly. Using a jaw-type puller will almost always result in separating the two wheel hub components, therefore ruining your wheel hub assembly. Be sure to lubricate the puller threads before use. As you can see, this type of wheel puller will keep the wheel hub components intact. On 2000 to 2008 front axles, the brake shield will come off with the wheel hub assembly. Use a pry bar to assist with axle shaft assembly removal. Here's a little different angle of taking the wheel hub off the other side. Use a 24 and 30 millimeter wrench or socket to remove the ball joint nuts. You will also need an 8 millimeter Allen bit to keep the ball joint stud from rotating if it breaks free. Use a suitable puller to separate the steering knuckle from the axle housing. Remove the lower ball joint snap rings. Be sure to clean thoroughly around both upper and lower ball joints so you don't damage the ball joint removal tools. TS1082 ball joint press set will remove ball joints from 2003 to 2013 AAM front axles. If the ball joints are kind of stuck in the C yokes, you can use a small hammer to help loosen them. Use a pick to take off the lower ball joint boot before removing the lower ball joint. Be sure the anvil is centered in the ball joint before pressing the ball joint out. Use QU95054 tie wire to secure the differential assembly. The differential adjuster lock pins can be removed with a 13 millimeter socket and pliers. Mark the differential bearing caps so they can be installed in the exact orientation as they were removed. Remove the differential bearing caps with an 18 millimeter socket. Use a punch to loosen the differential bearing adjuster nuts and remove the differential assembly. Remove the adjuster nuts. With the assistance of a pinion holding tool, remove the pinion nut with an 1¼ inch socket. Use a suitable puller to remove the pinion flange. If the flange is stuck, striking with a hammer can help loosen it. Shown here is the newer style pinion flange. Remove the pinion shaft with a hammer and punch. Pro tip: install the differential cover with 2 bolts to catch the pinion so it doesn't fall on the ground. Remove the pinion seal and outer pinion bearing. Here's the older style pinion flange, but as you can see, the removal process is the same. If you ate your Wheaties like this guy, you can remove the pinion shaft by hand. Use TS4862 to remove the inner axle shaft seals. Use a suitable driver to remove the inner and outer pinion bearing cups. Thoroughly clean the differential housing. You may notice excess sealant where the axle tubes were pressed in. Don't worry about removing that, just make sure it's clean. Thoroughly clean off rust from mating surfaces of any parts that will be reused. There are a number of tools that can be used to remove the pinion bearing from the pinion shaft. These clamshell style tools need to be used with a shop press. But instead, we're going to show it being done on the bench with this tool here. Remove the pinion shim and note its thickness. In most cases, you will use the same thickness for reassembly. Remove and discard the one-time use ring gear bolts. Remember, they're a lefty-tighty, righty-loosey. Place something close to the differential to protect the ring gear teeth and remove the ring gear by striking with a soft hammer. Remove the differential cross shaft retaining bolt with a 10mm socket. Note, you may need to secure the differential to get this bolt loose. Remove the differential cross shaft from the differential carrier, then rotate the pinion gears and remove them, followed by removing the differential side gears. Be sure to remove all of the thrust washers from behind these gears. Sometimes they stick to the oil inside the differential carrier. For removing differential side bearings, there are a number of tools suitable for the job. In this case, we're going to show a little bit different tool than we used before. Note these pockets cast into the differential carrier. It allows us to use the tool demonstrated here. Inspect these components for wear. Any galling, scoring, or burning will require replacing components. Run your fingernail along all mating surfaces. If it's rough, it probably needs to be replaced. Here's a good example of a side bearing that is burnt and pitted. I had a bit of an issue getting the camera to focus on this, but this bearing cup is deeply pitted, although it isn't burnt yet. Look at this deep pitting here. This axle was not very far from a major catastrophic failure. The side bearings and cups were in pretty bad shape, and honestly the pinion bearings and cups weren't much better. About the only thing saving this axle is all of the pitting allowed for extra oil retention, although that's not much of a positive. Inspect the ring gear and pinion gear teeth for galling, scarring, or sharp edges. Make sure differential side bearings have not spun on the differential carrier. Also make sure the internal gears have not chewed into the differential carrier. Use TK4880 Master Front Differential Bearing and Seal Kit, which contains new pinion bearings, differential bearings, pinion seal, pinion crush sleeve, pinion nut and washer, axle shaft seals, and differential cover gasket. Slide the correct thickness shim onto the pinion shaft, then install the pinion bearing with the QT1004 pinion bearing install tool. Use a suitable tool to press on the differential side bearing. Here we used ball joint remover QT1153, which is part of the TS1082 ball joint press set. Here we use something to protect the ball joint tool itself from damage. Install the differential internals with a light coating of oil on all mating surfaces. You will want to place these two gears exactly opposite of each other. If they're not exactly opposite of each other, you will notice the cross pin will not go in all the way. It's not a big deal though. Just rotate the gears back, move over one tooth, and try again. Install the crosspin retainer bolt with a 10mm socket and torque to 38 foot-pounds. Install the ring gear onto the differential carrier. This can be a little tricky to line up the holes, but this is how we do it. We place the ring gear bolt side down onto the differential and then slide a bolt in on opposite sides to center it. Thread in the rest of the bolts and gently draw the ring gear up to the flange using a crisscross pattern. Torque new ring gear bolts to 80 foot-pounds. Use a vise or suitable fixture to secure the press in the TS3065 U-joint press set. Insert the anvil and installer tip in the C-frame press. This will allow you to secure the axle shaft assembly to remove the snap rings. You will also be able to relieve pressure on rusty snap rings as needed. Tighten the press just enough to hold the shaft assembly. You don't want to put any excess pressure on the opposite side snap ring. Insert the separator yoke. This will allow you to remove one cap at a time and not damage the axle shaft. Trying to press the old joint out moving both caps with the installer tip will almost always result in bending the axle shaft yoke. If the axle shaft contacts the C-frame press, use something to support the other end of the shaft to square it up with the press. Now you can begin removing U-joint caps. Striking the axle shaft with a hammer can help relieve the tension on U-joint caps that do not want to come out. When the U-joint cross touches the axle shaft, take the assembly out of the press and remove the cap. Sometimes the caps are easily removed by hand, and sometimes they get hung up a little bit on the seal. Use pliers or other creative methods to finish removing the cap. The cap should spin at this point. Once the first cap is removed, move on to the next one. Here the cap seal got stuck, so we'll just take a hammer and punch and gently massage it so we can separate the two axle shafts. Here's that pesky seal after removal. Clamping only on the yoke ears, remove excess rust from machine faces so the new snap rings have a good place to seat. A cheap or worn out file works good for this. We aren't trying to remove metal, just rust. Then, use a round file to remove any burrs that may have been caused by the U-joint cross contacting the axle shaft. Using the installer tip for the press tool, install the new U-joint into the axle shaft. Use QU10945 U-joint kit for 2003 to 2009 axles or QU11263 U-joint kit for 2010 to 2013 axles. Both kits also contain new axle shaft slingers, hub bolts, and axle shaft nuts. Pro tip, press the cap in about a 1/4 inch further than the snap ring groove. This will allow the journals to support the rollers in this cap and the next cap you install. This greatly reduces the chance of cap rollers falling out of position and being crushed when pressing the next cap in. Here you can see the journals are supporting rollers in both caps. Install the snap ring in the first cap and press the second cap until the snap ring contacts the axle shaft. You should now be able to install the snap ring in the second cap. Repeat the previous steps to install the outer axle shaft. Be sure the U-joint snap rings will not contact any steps machined in the axle shaft. Use a pry bar to rotate the snap rings if needed. Use QK4685 tool to install the axle shaft seals. Notice the thrust plate has two sides to it. The stepped side is used against the differential housing to install the first seal. Press the seal in using a 7/8 and 1 1/8 wrench. Flip the thrust plate over to the ring side before installing the second seal. This end closely mimics the installer plate. The tool is designed this way to prevent seal damage. Use QT1816 bearing cup driver and either QT1101 1-inch driver handle or QT1119 1.25" Pro Duty driver handle to install the inner pinion bearing cup. Both handles are 14 inches long to reach inside the differential housing. Use QT1812 bearing cup driver to install the outer pinion bearing cup. Lightly oil the pinion bearings and insert the pinion shaft into the differential housing. Slide the new crush sleeve and outer pinion bearing onto the pinion shaft. Install the new pinion seal. Apply a light coat of Teflon thread sealant to the splines. Install the pinion flange onto the pinion shaft and lightly tap with a hammer until a few threads are showing. Then install new washer and lock nut. Use a flange holding tool to keep the pinion shaft from rotating and tighten the nut until there is no end play in the pinion shaft. Rotate the pinion shaft to seat the bearings and tighten the pinion nut in 5 foot-pound increments until a pinion rotating torque of 25 inch-pounds is reached. Install the differential side bearing adjuster nuts. Apply a light coat of oil to the differential bearings and install the differential assembly into the housing. Install differential caps in proper orientation and finger tighten the bolts. With the ring gear and pinion gear at 0 backlash, make sure both nuts are contacting the bearing cups. Use tool QT1117 to back off the ring gear side adjuster 4 holes to obtain initial ring gear backlash. Install adjuster lock and bolt finger tight. Tighten the pinion side nut against the bearing cup and rotate the differential several times to seat the bearings. Then loosen this pinion side adjuster and retighten until it just touches the bearing cup. Then tighten it 6 holes for new bearings or 4 holes when reusing bearings. Install the pinion side adjuster lock and bolt finger tight. Now tighten the cap bolts to 63 foot-pounds and then the adjuster lock bolts to 18 foot-pounds. Measure the ring gear backlash. It should be between 5 and 7 thousandths of an inch. If the backlash is slightly out of spec, adjust 1 hole at a time on each side. Rotate the differential assembly between adjustments to make sure the bearings are seated. Rotating the differential adjuster nuts by 1 hole will adjust the backlash by a few thousandths. I like it to be on the lower end, so this axle ended up being about 4.5 thousandths. One hole over that put this gear set about 7 thousandths of backlash. Either reading would work for this application. Now it's time to check the pattern. Paint the ring gear with QU95007 marking compound and rotate in both directions several times. Read the contact pattern. In a nutshell, the contact should be fairly centered on both faces of the ring gear teeth. Ensure the pinion rotating torque does not exceed 50 inch-pounds with the differential installed and adjusted. Now we can install the differential cover with a new gasket and torque to 30 foot-pounds. Be sure the axle is clean before installing new ball joints. Use toolset TS1082 to install new ball joints. Note the lower ball joint anvil has a smooth face. You may notice we are reusing original ball joints for this video. Typically when ball joints are removed, they will not be reused. Use QK4586 ball joint kit, which contains all parts required for ball joint service. Pro tip: the lower ball joint seal should be removed so the installer tool does not crush it. Once the ball joint is seated, tap the axle with a hammer and tighten the press a bit more to ensure the joint is correctly installed. The lower ball joint removal tool can be used to press on the new ball joint seal. Now install the lower ball joint snap ring. Now install the upper ball joint. Note the anvil for this has a step machined in the face so it contours the axle profile. For 2003 to 2009 axles, don't forget to reinstall this bracket with the knuckles. Use a 24 and 30 mm wrench to install the steering knuckle.
You will also need an 8mm Allen bit to keep the ball joint stud from rotating. Tighten the lower ball joint nut to an initial torque of 35 foot-pounds. Then torque the upper ball joint nut to 70 foot-pounds. And finally, retorque the lower ball joint nut to 148 foot-pounds. Insert the axle shaft assembly into the housing and gently tap it with a soft hammer to push it through the seal. Pro tip: apply anti-seize to hub and knuckle mating surfaces. Install the hub and torque bolts to 149 foot-pounds. Note that for 2003 to 2008 axles, the brake shields are also installed at this time. Install the axle nut and torque to 132 foot-pounds. Rotate the hub several times and set the final torque to 263 foot-pounds. Then install the cotter key. Remount the track bar and torque bolt to 285 foot-pounds. Install the tie rod assembly and torque nuts to 55 foot-pounds. For 2009 to 2013 axles, you can now install your brake shields. Assemble rotors, calipers, and dual rear wheel adapter if applicable. Reconnect ABS wires and fill axle with Mopar 7590 gear lube.